record this from this point forwards. So I will be able to hopefully record this first bit and then the second bit after I've had Tom, who's on the call, speak, to pop on the YouTube channel if possible as well. And we'll get started and let those folks who are not here in as and when they arrive onto the call as well. So I'll just change this on here and we'll get cracking. So slight agenda today, rough agenda. I'll give you a few updates from my end. Voice what's going on in the North Yorkshire sport landscape, things to consider and get involved with if you haven't yet, what's up and coming. And then also CPD opportunities that might be entailed with all things centered around North Yorkshire sport. And amongst those updates, I'm going to have Tom Blackburn from Harrogate Town. I have 5 or 10 minutes to share with you some bits and pieces that they're up to and what you can potentially get involved with your school. And also Matthew O'Sullivan, who's going to be coming to speak with us as well, a little bit about the, am I right in saying is it the healthy families stuff, Matthew? I could be wrong with that. I apologise.
Yes, that's it, yeah.
And then a little bit later on, we'll be having Dan from Beyond the Physical jump on to share with us some PE insights as well. So you won't just be getting bored of my voice for this whole meeting, and we'll probably endeavour to be finished and wrapped up by potentially 4:30 or just after. Perhaps the most important update from my personal perspective before I get into the wider things is that I am going to be leaving my post at North Yorkshire Sport a week on Friday, the 30th of June. So I'll be leaving my position as the education manager here. I have absolutely no doubt that there'll be somebody who comes in and fills my shoes 10 times over to do what I've been doing. But I am going to venture to pastures new to have secured a position at Leeds Beckett University as a lecturer of primary physical education. So following my passion fully down that path, which I'm excited about and excited to get stuck in with. In the meantime, if you do need to contact me, you've got another 10 more days and hopefully you can stay in touch after that. But there'll be somebody, you'll be made aware, hopefully, who that person will be in the coming months, and they will hopefully potentially pick up the baton and continue these PE Lead Network meetings in some way, shape or form moving forwards. But I thought I'd get that out there now early doors because it has been a pleasure hosting these. And those who I have worked with more closely, I do wish you all the best moving forwards. So North Yorkshire Sport updates. First thing I want to mention is there might be some people on the call. If you're sat there as one of them, this relates to you. If not, you can ignore this slide. One of my team members, Georgina, has asked me just to put a reminder out. If you've been approached and asked about the Active Live survey, the deadline for that being completed is the 26th of July. And I know Georgina is working incredibly hard to try and chase down schools and make sure that they've got that completed and it is all boxed off. So if you are indeed sat on this call and are one of those schools that Georgina has spoken to or tried to chase, I just wanted to give you a little nudge and a little reminder that is something that needs to be completed by the 26th of July. Next one here, similar slide to what I shared a couple of months ago with regards to the premium. The only thing that I've added on here that I noted in a bit of a Twitter conversation a couple of weeks ago is a second bullet point there. Now, we know the PE premium has been renewed for 2 extra years, and we know that this year it needs to be spent by July 31st, 2023. Key indicators remain the same. I would go as far as to say keep sticking with the same template. That is the latest one I'm aware of on the AFP website. I'll show you that in a moment on the next slide there. But there was a conversation with regards to underspend, and some of the documentation and screenshots I was sent and seen, in case you wasn't aware or weren't aware, is that any underspend from, I believe, going ahead next year will be recovered at the end of the 23-24 academic year. So make the most of all the money you've got, I guess, would be the message from that. And try and spend it wisely, sustainably, and make the best use of it. Whilst we have got 2 further years, and I appreciate I've probably said this next piece for the past 3 years or so, I would be surprised again if it continued beyond that. I'm not sure if it will, but that's something we'll wait to see if that funding will continue. That there, I believe, is the latest template. Still, I could be wrong on this, so please correct me in the chat if I am. But when I get people emailing me, asking me what template they should use and if they're the latest one, I still often go back to this one here, which you can find on the AFP website. Use that as your template for your reporting on your PE premium, and use the template in place. It's got it all structured nicely for you. Although I am aware some schools will just make their own up, and that's absolutely fine as well. CPD resources opportunities. I'll fly through these quickly before I pass you over to Tom, who will be sharing his screen. Level 5 and 6 we've ran for a couple of years. I've been tutoring this course for the past number of years. Obviously, won't be doing that moving forwards, but I'm moving pastures new, but it still will be running. Ignore the date on the graphic, but North Yorkshire Sport will be running another level 5 and 6 subject leadership. And the start date is predicted to be January 2024 now, not September anymore. There are still a few spaces left on that. So again, looking ahead to sustainability and with the continuation of the premium, that might well be something that you consider or could have a conversation with the senior leaders in your school if it's something you'd like to attend. It's a great course. I've had the pleasure of tutoring it and I love tutoring it. I know if Hannah is still on the call, hopefully she would have good things to say about it. She attended this year, Hannah Bishop, and we had a great time over the 5 days, mixture of theory, mixture of practical, very in-depth look, lots of fantastic conversations. And I've got a quick question here. Sarah, HLT is level 6. No, I believe level 6 is just for those with QTS, but you can do the level 5. Which is quite kind of frustrating because once you've done the level 5, you'd be in a great position to do level 6. But I believe you need QTS in order to do the level 6. Again, if there's anybody on the call knows that I'm incorrect in saying that, please do let me know. But my understanding is that you have to have QTS in order to do the level 6. A few other bits and pieces that are free to offer is we've got, again, I'll draw your attention to the Yorkshire and Humber Learning community for all things PE and beyond, to be honest with you. There's modules going on here all the time with a number of things to do with physical education, physical activity and sport. It's free to create an account and free to access. We've had newer modules on there about inclusion of LGBTQ+ in sport and physical activity and a whole host of different physically active learning modules and so forth. It is well worth a browse and a look, even if just for 5, 10, 15 minutes to pinch some ideas. It's very easy watching and easy listening as you watch and play through the videos. And new content gets added on an almost monthly basis in a number of areas. So just to have that free account to have a look back at is well worth drawing your attention to the Yorkshire and Humber Learning community. So if you haven't had a look, please do so. It'll be well worth your time. We've also got, as part of that, a little link. If you use the hyperlink I've typed on the screen there, you can have access to a free transition toolkit that was developed by colleagues at North Yorkshire Sport prior to myself starting there. There's a number of modules on there, as you can see on the screen, and with each of them become a task that you can do with a class or a group of children, and then some ideas for accompanying physical activity as well, with the idea of preparing them in these key areas for their transition to high school. But equally, I think it could be used with any age group in Key Stage 2 for those major milestones as they move through school, as all of those areas are really vital to help children when it comes to their learning and self-management and so forth as well. Okay, rattle through that, enough from me. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass on hosting responsibilities. Tom from Harrogate Town is going to have 5 or 10 minutes to share with you, and I'll keep an eye on the chat if there are any questions for myself or Tom in this next period as well. So if you bear with me, where are you, Tom? There you are. Make you host. Yep. Okay, I believe, Tom, that you are now hosting and should be able to share anything you want to share.
Yes, then that's come through. Thank you. Has that come up?
Yeah. Yeah, yep. I can see that.
Lovely. Right. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Blackburn, PE and School Sport Manager at Harrogate Town Community Foundation. Primarily overlook our Premier League Primary Stars programme, which is the main programme that I'm going to talk you through today. Just to introduce you to it if you've not heard about it before, and to give you a bit more information. And then I'll ask Ryan at the end if he's happy to send out sort of the brochure with details if anybody's interested or got any questions to send that afterwards. But just go into a bit more detail. Sort of why choose Harrogate Town FC Community Foundation. So this is our why linked to the programme. As you can see, it's run in line with the Premier League. So with the football sort of community. Our why, so to develop teacher skills, knowledge, confidence, to deliver high quality PE, to deliver participant skills and knowledge, improve their physical, mental and well-being, and then also to increase the number of children participating in competitive and also just physical activity. So these are our sort of outcomes when we go into schools and we deliver the Premier League Primary Stars programme. To add to that, running a statistics summary over this year so far, we've had 93% of the pupils we've worked with have come back and said they've enjoyed engaging in PE with us. And then we found 8 out of 10 teachers agree that they've developed their confidence, skills and knowledge when working with us through our Teach CPD programme. Some more photos just to bring it to life. So these are some photos. We've got our mascot, Harry Gator, who we can get into schools and sort of inspire the children. We've got first team players that we can also get into our partner schools to engage with the children. We've partnered with Zero Carbon Harrogate with their Walk to School Day, so campaigning with them to inspire children to walk to school, and just some more photos just to bring it to life. So expanding, so how the programme works. So the overall programme is Premier League Primary Stars, and then within that we've got some sub-programmes. So we've got our Teach CPD programme, which comes under the bracket of supporting PE lessons, which is our 12-week programme, where our coaches will come in, work with teachers, understand where they're at, understand the area that they need to develop, and sort of over the 12 weeks, sort of plot and plan their learning journey to help improve their knowledge and skills to deliver higher quality PE. Another part of that is our targeted interventions. So these are in curricular subjects. So these are across English, Maths and PSHE. And I'll go into a bit more detail on them on the next slide. And then on top of that, we do extracurricular clubs, assemblies and education activations, social action projects. And then we've got just our sort of PE programme as sort of a bit of an add-on as well, which I'll go into a bit more detail next. So what delivery looks like. So for example, the teacher programme, how it works is week 1, we will sort of sit down with the teacher, understand where they're at on their learning journey, ask them to identify areas of need, and then we'll work closely with them across the term, some coach-led, some co-delivery, some teacher-led, and it'll be all about developing their skills to deliver higher quality PE. So for example, if a teacher's unsure on how to implement assessment for learning techniques, we might take a lead on 2 or 3 lessons and showcase how we can implement them in PE, just to help with their knowledge on that. With the social action project, which is another part of the programme, this is all pupil led. So this is where children will identify a local need in their area, their community, and they will then plan and deliver a project which leaves a positive impact on their community. So a good example is we had Saltgate School a couple of years ago. The children identified walking to school. There was quite a lot of rubbish when they walked to school. So the kids, they got in contact with the council. They collected litter picking equipment, and then they actually went out and did a litter pick in and around their local community. Some examples of the interventions we've got: Reading Stars, which are English intervention. So using the power of sport and football to encourage children to engage in reading. We've got a new program we put together, which is our Town's Trailblazers, and this has been a great success this year. So a PSHE intervention, which is girls only, and it's designed to increase their confidence and resilience, as well as encouraging them to develop their football skills and inspiring them to get into football. So we use a lot of the Lionesses' stories and sort of how they got to where they did, and obviously their success in the Euros. And then finally, an example of an education activation would be World Book Day. And on World Book Day this year, we had all the first team players at Harrogate Town visit our partner schools, and they did an activity with the pupils where they selected a 5-a-side football team using their favourite book characters. And again, that was a real success this year. So that's sort of the process, I guess, of how the programmes work. Moving on to the next one. So this is just a testimony from a teacher from Grove Road. So this is a teacher that we've worked with in our CPD program this year. I'm not going to read the testimony out, so I'll just give you a moment, just sort of read through some of the things that Mr. G and our coach identified as in differentiation, so how they implement the STEPS principle, working children with SEND, and then Mr. G explaining how he's going to continue using them skills after we've worked with him. And that's it. I will leave my email and my mobile number on the last slide. Like I said, I will ask Ryan to send out. We've got a bit of a brochure which has a bit more information around the programs. I was conscious it didn't want to take too much time today.
Yeah.
If you've got any questions, obviously, please feel free to drop me an email or give me a buzz on my number that I've left on there.
Smashing. Thank you for that, Tom, and being so succinct and precise. If you've got something you can send over to me, I can then get that out to the wider network and share. So that's not a problem at all to do. It's great to see the variety of things on there as well, particularly sticking out to me. I like the thought of the social action projects. I think they sound great and something which can impact and give back to the community and getting the children to think more local and about what's going on around them and how they can make a difference, which is fab. So much appreciated. Please do send those things across. And in the meantime, as you've just seen Tom's details, please do get in touch with him as well. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Going to be straight into the next bit. Straight in here, Matthew O'Sullivan, I said, was on the call as well. I'm going to hand over the mic to you, as it were. I'm going to shut up for now, and I'd just like to tell us a little bit about what you've come to share with us today about the family stuff.
No problem. Just make that. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name's Matthew O'Sullivan. I'm a health and wellbeing development officer for Brimham's Active in the Harrogate district. I was asked to launch a pilot scheme for a children's weight management program. Now, it is a children's weight management program. However, research has suggested from public health that we use a compassionate approach and sort of talk about how to incorporate healthier choices, healthier options, increase physical activity levels, cooking healthy recipes, and through that, the byproduct should be weight loss. Some families can use weight if they want to, but I think the majority of the families are using the compassionate approach. So Healthy Families, it's a completely free service, and there are 12 sessions as well. It's a remote service where the families have access to a health and wellbeing coach, and every week they will meet with the coach, and there'll be a particular topic that the coach will discuss with them every week. So just to give you an example of some examples what they talk about. So they talk about things like hydration, nutrition, sleep, physical activity, mental health and well-being, talking through healthy recipes, and they talk about setting goals as well, not just specifically for their children, but for the family as a whole, because we want the whole family to engage, because again, research does suggest that if the family isn't behind it fully, it won't work. So just to speak to you a little bit about the criteria as well. So it's for children aged 4 to 19. It is for children with a BMI at or above the 91st percentile, so classed as overweight. And it's not just for the Harrogate area. I'm based in Harrogate, but it's for the whole of North Yorkshire. And the family need to be a resident of North Yorkshire, or registered with a GP practice or school in North Yorkshire. You can self-refer into the programme, or if families want to, they can see their GP, and their GP can refer into us as well. Just to talk to you about the process. So once we receive the referral, our triage team will call the family. We'll speak to the family, triage them, and then book a initial health assessment with the health and wellbeing coach, where they will ask a series of questions just to get relevant information from the families. They then will book their first initial session after the health assessment. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the day and time of every booking is the same day and time every week. Because again, with that, you get better engagement. Obviously, things will crop up. So they might say we can't attend that particular day and time. And we're flexible with that, so we can move the days and times as and when the families need to. What we do then is at the end of the 12th session, we then have a further health assessment just to see how far the children have come on the programme, and then showing them the results as well. If they are successful with and fully engaged in those 12 weeks, they then get a 3-month maintenance programme where our health and wellbeing coach will touch base with the families once per month in those 3 months, just to see how they're getting on, and if they're keeping up with their physical activity sessions, healthy eating, just to generally check on them as well. And then at the end of that 3-month period, there is another health assessment as well, just for us, obviously, to collect the data. That all the data that we collect goes to public health, just to sort of future-proof and make the programme better, because it's a pilot and things obviously aren't 100%. So we're kind of learning as we go with it. But the reason why I wanted to come along today was just to make you all aware of it within the schools. I will, in the chat, I will leave my email contact details, and if you need to get in contact with me at all and want further information, I'm more than happy to go through some more info with you. So yeah, that's mine, short and sweet. I didn't come with a presentation. I'm really sorry. I would have.
That's great.
But yeah, I will leave my details, and I can also pass on things to you, Ryan. And if you want to,
of course,
sort of populate that, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I know you speak to when you're talking about the things that you just were. I'm sure everybody on the call can be sitting and thinking, and in their head there'll be children or families in their community that immediately spring to mind. And that's something that can really help and support them. So if any of that resonates with you, get in touch with Matt. And again, if there's anything that I can send out on the back of this meeting, similar to what I said to Tom, get that succinctly passed my way. And by the back end of this week, I'll sort of send them a follow-up to what's going on here. So I appreciate that, Matt, for you jumping on in your time as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on. Really excited, actually, because I know Dan, who I can see is on the call right now. Dan is joining us, Dan Wilson from Beyond the Physical. And I've known Dan for a number of years in a few guises now. From his teaching days back local here in Knaresborough and so forth, and somebody who in the space of primary physical education is working with Beyond the Physical. And those who are on the call now, who have been to any of my training, will know that I speak about Beyond the Physical in the highest regard all the time, and the chaps that do the work there. And I know that in the PE space, the work that they put out, the work that Dan has put out over the past number of years is fantastic, which is why I always advocate for the work that they do. So it was without a doubt that I was going to plug my way and try and get them and Dan onto this call at some point or other, to share with us insights into the world of PE. It's the sort of stuff that I love to discuss and talk about, but I know for you guys on the call, Hannah knows full well, having been on level 5 course, get bored of me rattling on long enough about some of this stuff. And it's nice to hear different perspectives. And I know that Dan and his wealth of knowledge and what they're doing at Beyond the Physical will do just that. So it's my pleasure to have Dan with us on the call. What I will do in a moment, Dan, is give you the hosting responsibility so you can share your screen, because it won't let me make you a co-host for some reason. Yeah, and then then you can take it away from there.
Yeah, go for it. Now, I'll hopefully, fingers crossed, the ICT will work for us. But yeah, just great to be here, guys. Thank you. I've literally just whizzed back from the school where I've been delivering this afternoon, so I was a bit sweaty to start with, so I didn't have my camera on. Back in now. Just to say, yes, my name is Dan Wilson, but I do get confused with Dan Wilson from Yorkshire Sport. I am a different Dan Wilson. We happen to live in the same town, do the same things in terms of sport and PE and things, delivering similar courses, but I am a different person, I promise. Not the same person running around. But yeah, I'm just going to share hopefully with us today a little bit around what we do at Beyond the Physical, and then fingers crossed, hopefully if I can share this, just a little bit around sort of CPD, around what we kind of do. And again, very much what Ryan, I'm sure, talks a lot about, but fingers crossed. No, we'll get on. Can you see that all right, Ryan?
Yeah, that looks spot on to me, does that, Dan? Cheers.
Yeah, so basically, and what I will say is there's going to be lots of here that might be things that Ryan's discussed before. It might be that they've got some new people on tonight, so this might be the first time hearing these things. And again, it doesn't mean to say that this CPD sort of session now around sort of changing sort of PE and what our PE curriculum is particularly going to look like. It doesn't mean to say that we expect you now just to go away and rip up our PE curriculums and start again, but it's just getting those cogs turning a little bit around sort of what PE could look like within the primary setting. And obviously, I can leave things from us and what we're doing at Beyond the Physical. But it's not to say that, you must follow what we do, but it's just opening their eyes a little bit to what it could look like and things that could be there. And just ways of change. I know AFP have got sort of like transformative PE as their sort of little buzzword at the minute. Just sort of thinking about what we can do to transform the space that we're in, to really take what we're doing for the children, the learning in PE, just to kind of a different direction. But hopefully this will kind of bring us in. So who we are Beyond the Physical. We're kind of predominantly sort of a Yorkshire-based company, but we do go all over the country, and we have sort of different staff that work around the country. And we work with a vast range of organisations from up and down the country, from sort of CCO clubs like Harrogate Town and York City to Liverpool to West Brom to all over the world. Coaching companies, and if there's anybody on tonight who's sort of one of those people who works for sort of coaching companies, working with those guys. But the aim of what we do is we aim to empower teachers to deliver high quality physical education. A bit like what Tom was saying from Harrogate Town, what they're doing to try and drive up standards. So it's just what we can do, what we can offer, and what we can sort of put out there to really make PE something amazing within our school for our young children. So that's Steve, who's one of our bosses, and Paul in there. There's some details on the screen there, which I'll put on again at the end for you to kind of see. We always kind of do a lot of our CPD around this, and starting off with our journey and kind of where that is and where our sort of biases sometimes lie. And for me growing up, and Ryan will know, just been in PE and sport all my life, but that's not necessarily everybody's journey. For teachers, that could be a very sort of scary journey. Their PE, their primary PE, their secondary PE might not be a particularly nice experience. And for children as well, their bias of what they think PE is, what it is like, their journey can have a completely different journey to what you are, of what different children are. So it's very much think about where you are, what you are, and your sort of personal bias, but also then think around these three key words you always throw out. There will be some things today that might sort of agree with, and you sort of, yeah, I get that, understand that. There might be some things that get you thinking a little bit, and like we said, it might just change and get a few cogs going. And it might be some things that actually go against what you kind of do now, and go and sort of challenge some of the thinking a little bit. And I know Ryan's always keen to sort of challenge thinking and challenge the way that primary PE is seen. So this might go against the grain a little bit for what you do or what you see or what you have as your primary PE curriculum. It's not saying anything is right or wrong. It's just thinking about things in a little bit of a different way of what we can do. So I'm particularly going to focus on today around mastery in PE, and then I go a little bit around what we call the power of three and what we use. But mastery is one of these sort of terms that's coming really into play within the national curriculum as well. We end up doing a lot of sort of CPD at the moment from different people who are really thinking about mastery across the curriculum, mastery in maths, mastery in science, mastery across the whole curriculum, and also then asking, well, how does that work in PE? What is PE going to look like? How can we show mastery in PE, and what can we do? And I suppose looking at the national curriculum, the aim of when the national curriculum changed is they really shrunk the curriculum for PE into just a few smaller areas that really then for us to hone our craft into those particular areas and really develop those in much more detail and really go, what we say, deepen the learning and really go in more depth rather than just lots of different things and lots of different sports, lots of different activities, and there's no real deep sort of learning in there. So we need to really think about what we're delivering within our PE curriculum. Is it deep? Can we just really focus in on what that national curriculum is asking us to do and go through that again and again and again and really looking at these things that I mentioned before, like formative assessment, looking at closing the gaps, bringing those different abilities together so we can really focus in on not just disappearing off into different sports and worrying about trying to get better at different sports, but really think about what that national curriculum is asking us to do. Now, I know Ryan put a very similar slide up last time, if anyone was on it last time, but about kind of what a typical sort of structure looks like. And it can very much look like predominantly when you look at your PE teaching, your PE curriculum, like what we see there, this week by week approach of just week 1 this, week 2 this, week 3 this, week 4, etc. And we've got to really sort of start to think about, is this deepening the learning of what the children are doing? If we are just having one particular week or one particular skill focus, then we're not going to have that depth of learning and that mastery, which we keep referring to, across specific skills, concepts, knowledge, etc. So I'll put there at the bottom the DK and the PK, decorative knowledge, the procedural knowledge, that's sort of the Ofsted sort of buzzwords. If we're doing a week 2 on passing, when we get to the end of that lesson, we might have had a really good lesson, a great lesson, might have got lots of passing into it. Those children will not have mastered that. They will not have got all the knowledge and all the key concepts around that passing. But whatever happens then quite often is that we just move on and next week we're doing dribbling. So all that great work we did on passing and where we got up to in that passing sequence or where we are, we've kind of moved away now. We're just doing something completely different. And that's sort of where we lack that mastery in PE because we're so focused on, we need to do hockey. So we need to learn how to pass in hockey. Then we need to learn how to dribble in hockey. Then we need to, we're doing football. So we need to learn how to pass in football, then dribble in football. And we forget to get really deep in that learning. And what we need to do is kind of twist that around a little bit, really focus on maybe 1 or 2 of these areas as our sort of aim and our learning theme, and really drive that and really go deep into that. And maybe spend 3, 4, 5 weeks around a particular focus that's going to have a lot more impact for your children's learning rather than just moving on. If you think about that across other subjects, which I know has been talked about before, if you were doing a maths lesson on number 1s to 20, at the end of the session, if a child only got 5 questions right, no, best luck, no, well done, we did well. But next week, tomorrow, we're doing time. So don't forget about that. Forget where you were up to. Forget about that you only got 5 right out of 20, because tomorrow we're going to do time. And then the next day, we're going to do some measure. So actually, what you're doing, it doesn't really matter. And that's kind of like that PE approach. And we talked there about like a games approach. But that could be similar for like gymnastics or other things as well, in terms of like, right, week 1, we do travel. Week 2, we do balance. Week 3, we do rolling. And then we kind of put it together near the end in a sequence. And there's got no real depth to what we're doing. And what we're trying to advocate at Beyond the Physical is trying to think about picking 1 or 2 of these key elements and really going a lot deeper into it to really get some real learning taking place rather than just whizzing through. And again, it is that spiral curriculum, which I know is sort of one of those buzzwords that's been around for a long time, but thinking about how we can revise and add in new things, but keep developing until we go to that mastery sort of level. Now, we know we're not going to expect children in primary school to master everything that what they're going to do. And we've never got enough hours in the day to do that on top of all the other subjects. But it's thinking about how we can just drop in little bits of new content, changing the difficulty, changing that approach, just dropping things in within that same sort of area, within that same what we call learning theme, to really sort of go towards that mastery approach. So we're not just developing something and then just dropping it and going on to the next thing, dropping it, going on to the next thing. Or even within a lesson, sometimes when you see sort of schemes work, it's 10 minutes on this game, right, pack that away, 10 minutes on this new little bit, right, pack that away, 10 minutes. Like, we actually need to spend longer and get more time and more things in there to get the children to have more repetition, more learning, and more time in what they're doing. And these are just some quotes as to why, and I won't bore you with reading them all out, but I know Ryan shared some quotes before from similar names and similar people. Just that this approach that we're talking about, of this like week 1, week 2, week 3, if you go up to that very top quote on there, it's from 1992, and that's 30 years ago that people were saying that this approach doesn't work. It disaffects children. They don't learn. They don't have any deep knowledge of what they're doing. And then children don't want to be part of that PE for that longer term period. And then 30 years later, we're still getting Ofsted in the middle saying curriculums with short blocks of learning don't work. They lack depth of learning. They lack sort of that activity and the time that it needs to really build that learning. I think this is a key thing for us that, again, like I said, I don't expect people to be ripping up and changing curriculums, but really just to think about what can you do? What's some key concepts and key learning that needs to take place within that period of time that your unit is, whether it's a half term, whether it's 12 weeks, whether it's 10 weeks, whatever it is, just to really think about going a little bit deeper rather than sort of going laterally and just going through all the processes just to get to, I know these different things for that sport. So I'll learn drop shot in tennis, and I'll learn a serve in tennis one week, and then we'll learn forehand and backhand, and then we'll play a game and have a competition just because we need to learn tennis. But actually what we need to think about is really thinking about what sort of skills, and this is talking holistically as well. It's not just physical skills, but a broad range of skills or concepts that they can really learn, what the children need. That's what we can drive our learning through and really drive that. And we were talking this morning to a subject advisor in New Zealand who was talking a lot about the Move Well curriculum that they've designed. And theirs is very much thinking about the children's need. What do the children need to learn? What's those key elements? What's those key concepts? Is it taking risks? Is it learning communication? Is it throwing accurately? Whatever it is that they are doing, but going deep into that and adapting and changing and their approach and adding things in. We mentioned like step principle earlier with Tom and what they were doing at Harrogate, tweaking and adapting our lessons. So it's really thinking about that learning theme going a lot deeper and a lot longer, rather than just jumping and moving on just for a sport specific sort of approach. And we always kind of share this as well, which we have a pyramid. You know, as Ryan sort of shared a similar sort of Jenga block tower sort of pyramid before, and think about where do we need to be focusing on in primary PE. Now, although this is kind of physical skill specific rather than sort of other elements of the sort of curriculum we can look at, we're just really reinforcing that we need to have these children having those fundamental movement skills and those fundamentals of movements before we start stacking up all these other things on top. With it, as an organisation, as a group of teachers, that we really need to be embedding this through school. And when you look at sort of reports that come out, these are things, though, in the Ofsted report, it was mentioning 8, 9, 10-year-olds that still didn't have the fundamental movement skills, you know, confident and competent movers at that age. But we're so focused on, right, we need to do football, or we need to do tag rugby, or we need to do netball, that we're bringing it in year 2 or year 3 or wherever it is. And it's too early. That we really need to think about getting a layer of that mastery of those fundamentals. So then we can drop in these fundamental sport skills on top of that, and those sport specific skills later on, or it might be going when it's diving into clubs or going into high school, wherever they're going, we can sort of then start placing those blocks on top, but they've got that real firm foundation of fundamentals. And it doesn't need to be that we do lots of drills and lots of things in there, and that's all we focus on. And we talked a lot with Marissa from New Zealand this morning about learning through play a lot and trying to explore and you know, get those children moving and through play. We don't have to learn to throw by standing up and see each other and throwing 20 times and then doing it again and doing it again. But learning through play, learning through movement, learning in and through all those different activities that really get that base level of fundamental movement. And this next slide isn't to sort of knock anybody or really have a go, but these are some things, and Twitter is obviously sometimes our best friend and our worst enemy sometimes. And I'm sure Ryan will see it sometimes and think, yeah, brilliant, love that idea. And then somebody's like, oh no, what is that? But these are just some examples of picking up, and it's not to knock anyone. I don't know the context of this and I don't know what's happening, but it's just sort of ideas that people are putting out of doing really great things today in PE. That Key Stage 1 tennis, we're working on forehand and footwork. And it's like, do they need to be learning that real sport specific skill in Key Stage 1? Key Stage 2 are doing block and jab tackling in hockey. No, that's such a sport specific skill that if you went into like that pyramid, it's like 4 rungs up on that pyramid. Even could argue position specific if you're looking at like defenders. Really high up on that pyramid that we're working on. And do they have actually a real foundation? Now, it might be that Key Stage 1 tennis, their whole unit could be forehand and footwork. That might be the name of it. And they're doing loads of that over and over again, and lots of striking of a ball and lots of moving into space and lots of moving in an area and hitting balls off cones and hitting different size balls. Brilliant. But I've got a feeling that probably the next lesson would have been backhand and something, or overarm serve. And then we really lose that mastery because we're just focusing on these sport-specific skills. And again, that middle one, learning about baton changing techniques in relay racing. Now, again, such a sport-specific skill. If that's going to happen, if you want to do some relay running, let them experiment and explore. Like, what can we do? What happens if we take a baton round this way? What happens if we pass it this way? What do we need to really be that specific in learning that specific skill of baton changing so we can learn about athletics through baton changing? Is that really where we want to be with our children, what we want the children to learn? Do they need to just learn how to move and run and adapt and pass things to each other? And it could be a ball, it could be a kite, it could be a beanbag, it could be throwing it into each other, it could be passing it underarm, overarm. How does it work if we pass it from left hand to left hand, right hand to right hand, and let them explore and experiment and find these things out? And that gets them to have that real fundamental base layer before we start adding in these sport-specific elements. And I've got a feeling these guys here, again, we're sort of year 2, year 3 age, learning a baton changing technique. It's like question just really what we're doing within our PE and think about where we are. So what we kind of developed at Beyond the Physical, where we are, is what we call the power of 3. And I know sort of Ryan's big on the sort of words and using these words. And I know Ryan's talked before about using different amount of words, but we go down the 3 approach. So all our learning themes are based around 3 clear words and 3 words that we use as like a learning title, as a success criteria, and what they are on there. So we want the children to really focus in on something key, something fundamental in their learning they need to do. And again, sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's more holistic. Sometimes we've got some that are called like dual win lose, all about learning to compete and learning to win, learning to lose. Fair share dare, learning to work with each other, play fairly, sharing equipment, sharing scoring systems, taking risks, all those things. But we're working on just really key elements that can be broken down, avoids that overload of long-winded I can statements or learning objectives at the start of lessons, to really focusing on what is going to make children show really good success within this learning. It's going to be around looking for space, moving into space and avoiding other people. And that learning theme can then be translated to lots of different areas. It could just be playing tag on the playground or playing stuck in the mud or Pac-Man, but it could also then go into those sports that they might play either at club level or higher up school or in high school, that it might be into more like a tag rugby or might move into that. And it's that vehicle can be very different, but we want to really focus in on that learning through those keywords. And I know there's other people, and if people follow things like Steve Jeff, who's one of the sort of North York people who quite often comes on the calls, like he's created lots of sort of 3-word units that just make our learning really focus in on something that the children will need, that's going to be a little bit deeper in their learning, rather than just focusing on those sports and just doing the same things over and over again. Every year we do forehand and backhand and serving, and we'll play some games. Then next year we'll do tennis again because it's summer and it's nice, we can get outside. We'll do those things again, and we work on forehand and backhand and drop shot, and actually think about what these children need, what they need to focus on, and really hone in on something particular and go deep into that throughout that whole unit of work. And again, this kind of comes into dropping in a little bit of the sort of step principle, and what we kind of really advocate within our sort of delivery is using that model to really sort of tweak and adjust what we're doing. So rather than just moving on, think of that activity that you've got. Think of what that vehicle is that you're driving it. We were talking this morning, I'd say, with the guys from New Zealand, looking at their Move Well curriculum, and they've got some great ideas and games and things that they can use. But then think about what they can do to change and adapt and create learning within there. So it might be changing space. It might be playing in a rectangle and change it to a triangle. It might be changing the scoring system of how it works. So rather than everyone gets 1 point, some children get 3, some get 2, some get 1. How does that change what they're doing? How does that change the way you're going to play the game? And that starts bringing that knowledge and tactics and thoughts behind it. Can you modify equipment? Can you take things out? Can you add more than one ball in the game? Can you, not play that striking game with a tennis ball, but playing it with a large ball, with a beach ball, with a balloon, with all those different things? And allowing those little changes and those little tweaks can then challenge, can adapt, can just work at a different angle. And Ryan talks about lift different lenses when he's with his PE umbrella, looking at different lenses. And what can we do in that to really think about learning and changing things and adapting things, rather than just moving on to another activity and moving on to another activity, but really think about tweaks that we can make to focus in on that learning and go a little bit deep within their learning. And so here's a bit of like an example of just ideas that we use. So this is our curriculum. It's just a selection of units that we have. We've got many more different ones there. We're just looking at those 3 key words that really focus in on something that they're going to be learning about. So it might be that you have a unit now that you're doing that might be a rounders-based unit or a tennis-based unit or something. But try and think about, can you pinpoint something that's going to be a real focus of learning within that unit? So like strike, react, rallies, a tennis-themed learning, but it could be then towards badminton or squash or anything that involves striking a ball and moving in that space to hit a ball and strike a ball. But it isn't just then focused on a sport. It's focused on key concepts and key skills that can be then moved into lots of different areas and progressed in lots of different ways. And the children then can go deep in their learning. They can hone that craft. And then when you see doing these different sports, I think they've got that knowledge, they've got that basis for what they do as they sort of move higher up the school. And the sort of final bit really for me, sort of think about that language of learning. What we often do is talk about doing. What are we doing in PE today? The amount of time they're going to school. What are we doing in PE today? What are we doing? Are we doing dodgeball? Are we doing basketball? And it's kind of trying to find that little shift in language a little bit and think about, rather than changing that doing to what are we learning and that key thing. And then I put there then, so what are we learning in PE today? We're learning basketball. Or what are we teaching? I'm teaching basketball. Can we really learn basketball and teach basketball? That's quite a broad thing to try and do there, learning basketball. It doesn't quite work. Which is why then if we just have that little bit more of a focus about what we're doing. So here's some sort of examples that we sort of talking about. Learning to find space. So our key word is space. What are we learning? We're learning to find space. We're learning how to collaborate. Learning, that's a key focus of our learning. And that could be over a long period of time. It's not just one lesson. It could be many different units, many different pieces of work, different units that you're doing. We're doing that. We're learning how to throw accurately. And that could be broken into 2. It could be accuracy. Could be throwing, could be either or, it could be accuracy of striking, it could be accuracy of throwing, it could be accuracy of bowling, whatever it needed to be. But thinking about that key language of sort of learning, rather than getting away from what we're doing some basketball this afternoon, we're doing some tennis, we're doing some cricket. Actually, what are we learning? Really focusing in on our key aspects of learning rather than just the doing elements. And that sort of real skill specific bit, and I picked up one there that was from Ryan's podcast from somebody else as well. But having those real sport and skill specific objectives to things. So we're going to learn how to overhand serve in tennis. That was something I'd seen on Twitter. Today we were learning how to overhand serve in tennis. And then one mentioned on Ryan's podcast, learning how to cartwheel. And actually, if we could just pull that back a little bit and say, right, we're learning to strike, or we're learning to move from hands to feet. And that's what our learning is. It just gives a lot more opportunity for success. If we've got our real specific objective of overhand serve in tennis, how many of the children can do that within that one short piece of lesson? Probably not many. And so then you're really reducing that success. How many can perform a cartwheel perfectly at the end of that lesson? Probably not many. But if you said we're learning how to go from hands to feet, or we're learning how to strike, that could be striking a balloon, striking a ball, striking with a noodle, striking with a tennis racket, a cricket bat, a hand on hand paddles, could be performing cartwheel, it could be going hands to feet, so it could be just hopping in from a hand to then a foot, it could be like your frog jumps where you go from feet to hands back to feet again. But it allows those children who are really confident to go one way, and it allows those other children to maybe go a different way, and it allows that much more exploration and much more sort of go in different directions, and then allows that children to sort of explore, develop, find success one way, and then adapt and tweak and find success in another way and keep building and building on that key learning, rather than it just being sort of, we're learning how to do some tennis, we're playing tennis, okay, or really specific sport-specific things in tennis. Like, what can we do that's those concepts? So like we have evading. Well, evading could be anything. It could be evading a ball, it could be evading a person, it could be evading some space, cones, whatever it is. But what can we do? What can we sort of activities we can drive that can go in lots of different ways, but have a real focus in that learning that we do. So just leave then a couple of sort of key things. So think about, what are you doing within your curriculum, or what can you do to really sort of promote mastery within your PE curriculum? Are you going deep in that learning, or do you tend to go down that week 1, week 2, week 3 approach, changing things all the time where there's no real depth of learning? Or can you just have a few tweaks to what you're doing, not just do one lesson on it, but maybe go 2 or 3 lessons on it, So you're really going a little bit deeper in what they're doing, and not to get bored. And don't want the children to get bored in what they're doing, because then you can change and the children can have some ownership and adjust things and tweak things. And then you can sort of move that and change that around a little bit. And then think about that, adapting that typical structures. Okay, going away from that sport specific, can we change it a little bit, moving away from that sport specific approach to something a little bit different, okay, and that bit more transformative, rather than just doing tennis this half term or athletics this half term or rounders this half term because it's sunny and we always do that. And every summer we always get the tennis rackets out. Can we do something a little bit different? Can we just have a little bit more thought to what the children need in their learning and really have a focus on that? And then again, that last one, just think about that language that we're using. Think around that clear focus of learning, not just doing, not just playing, not just playing basketball because we're playing basketball, or doing tennis because it's now tennis season. But what is our clear focus of learning that the children need to get from our PE delivery? Do we need to learn how to evade and find space? Do we need to learn how to strike and react? Do we need to go away from the physical, and do we need to learn how to play as a team and collaborate and cooperate? And that could be a unit in itself that you do, and you develop games and develop skills and you develop lots of different vehicles, but your focus is around communication or collaboration that really need to be taught to the children as well. So that's just some sort of key bits from me. If anyone wants any sort of further info, there it is on there. We're quite sort of prominent on Twitter. If anybody's a Twitter aficionados at _Beyond Physical, that's our email address if you want to get in touch with anyone at Beyond the Physical, even just to discuss things. We obviously have our own sort of primary PE scheme of learning. We deliver sort of staff CPD sessions, sort of mini Ofsted, sort of deep dives into PE, teacher support, delivery, those types of things. So if there is anybody interested, get in touch. If you wanted to get me personally, I'm Dan at beyondthephysical.co.uk, so you can swap the info for Dan. And feel free to get in touch with anything. And we have got things we got. If you look on our website, we've got sort of free CPD sessions and Zoom sort of conferences that we've done before. We've got sort of trials of schemes of work, so you can have a little look and have a play. And like I said, it's not for me to sit here and you know, take apart people's curriculums and say what you're doing is wrong. But it's just getting us to think a little bit about what we can do to tweak what you're doing and what you're doing to make it even better for the children that's there. But I'll leave that with you then. If they come back, you know, please feel free to get in touch. I know Ryan's great at advocating what we do and sharing it out to people and mentioning it to people already before. But yeah, if there is anything that comes through myself, I'll go through Ryan and he can get in touch. He's got my email. I'll be in touch with us, I'm sure. But yeah, thank you very much. Is there anyone you want to ask, Ryan, or anybody else?
Well, I mean, first of all, a huge thank you, Dan. I think it's very clear now for everybody who's on the call as to why I asked Dan to come on the call, because of all of what he's just shared. I've just been writing a few bits and pieces down, and if you've got any questions for Dan, whilst I'm going to rattle off a few of these bits and pieces to spark a bit of discussion, please do fire those into the chat. And I know you might have them retrospectively, you could ask him afterwards, but so much of what Dan has shared there holds true to a lot of my core beliefs around physical education. And it's wonderful to see the work happening in the space, because we do need to challenge the status quo of what's going on and what's happening and what has happened over a number of years. Dan shared that quote there from 1992. 30 years ago, but we're still having that same discussion. I've written down here in terms of the curriculum, and this is something I pitched at a recent PE meeting here in North Yorkshire. When we were looking at curriculums, and I asked some PE leads to tell me about their curriculum and what it looks like from September to May. And the simple question I asked was, why do you do it like that? Why? And it's funny, the most common answer as to why things were done was weather. But beyond that, it was kind of because that's just the way it's done. And I said, says who? You tell me who told you to do it that way. And it was amazing to see the discussion spark out of that when they started saying, well, actually, yeah, I could do that piece of work over there, and I could do that there. And they started to reflect and think, yeah, it's a really good point. Just because this scheme of work suggests I have to do it there doesn't mean you've got to do it there. And I say this all the time about the wonderful units and schemes that are out there, some phenomenal ones. Other ones might not be quite as good, but they've not been written with your school in mind. And I say this all the time, they've not written it for your school, your environment, your equipment, or your kids. So whatever you use, you've got to use it loosely and be able to build around that. But that rigor and that focus. And I shared this on the level 5 course, and in one of my last meetings is the Williams 7 principles of curriculum design. And, rigor is one of those on there. And as Dan alluded to, when we think about that curriculum and the learning, I always share that Jenga analogy picture. If you were on the call before, you know that, because actually learning is like a tower of Jenga or a Lego tower where you stack learning on top of each other. And if you are just touching upon dribbling for 1 week, then that single block that you're putting in, it's either going to be misplaced because it's just been touched upon lightly, or more likely it's not even there at all because you haven't given it enough rigor. And what that means is when you're stacking the learning on top, all of that future learning is at risk. And sooner or later, that tower is going to come crumbling down. And that's when we start looking into that whole confidence and competence piece amongst the learners. And it's critical at this early age that we have these young children loving not just physical education, the subject, but just moving their bodies and being active. And if they've got an element of confidence and competence to do so, that should be the most important thing at this age. And, we've got that in the 4 aims of the national curriculum. The first aim states about developing competence. And competence is key to unlock all of those other aims in terms of being able to engage in competitive physical activity or to be physically active for sustained periods of time. If you are competent, you can do that more. If you are not competent, you're unlikely going to do those. So that rigor there is very, very important. Another one I've written down here, which again, I'll just sort of backing up with what Dan said, is that element of autonomy and choice is so, so powerful amongst pupils, giving them an element of choice about, do they use a ball? Do they use a scarf? Do they use a beanbag? Do they use a bib? Do they strike with their hand? Do they use a batting implement or a paddle? And allowing them to guide their own learning. And yes, some pupils will choose something that's maybe too easy for them. There's danger of coasting. Some might choose something too difficult. But then as the teacher, you've got that helicopter view and you can dip in and out and you can manage accordingly using your step principles and so forth to help them have that almost Goldilocks zone of learning where it's just right for them and they can achieve success. If we're talking about achieving success or small wins, if we can get the majority of our pupils in our lessons leaving having achieved some success or a small win every lesson, fantastic. Whether that's a physical success, whether we look more holistically and we talk about the fact that they've been a great listener, a great team leader, they've problem solved, they've maybe develops their ability to accept defeat or losing in a more gracious way, sing their praises. That's a fantastic win for some children out there who have been able to do that and develop. And just the last thing for me to touch upon in terms of what Dan mentioned again is that learning objective. It made me laugh when you mentioned serving, actually, Dan, because I take my lad, Oliver, I take him to tennis and he does 3 lessons a week and he has been doing it for about 3 years. Technically, he's far better than I am because he's getting these lessons at this point and he's only 9. But they've only recently started maybe exploring serving as a concept. And it's something he finds quite difficult. Now, I appreciate some children as humans, naturally, we can lend our hand to things better than others. But they've only just approached that now. And he's been doing 3 lessons a week and playing tennis for about 4 years. And he's finding it difficult. So if we just go to our generic class of 30 year 5s, most of which will have never picked up a racket before, and we throw in a learning objective and we're learning to serve, the amount of success achieved there with that being the key objective, in my opinion, would be very, very minimal and not achievable and sustainable. And in the past, when we think about delivering tennis, if we are indeed using that as the unit of work in the first place, it's thinking about looking at floor tennis to begin with and just using things to roll and push along the floor to get that body motion and movement. Because for many, many pupils that we teach in our society, in our communities, so many of them are not afforded the opportunity to attend things outside of school. So the only exposure they're getting to build their fundamentals is in our PE lessons. So if we're hitting them with overarm serves and backhands and forehands and whatever that looks like, I think we're doing them a disservice. And if they can't achieve success and we don't differentiate well enough, you can see that their confidence and then therefore their motivation is going to fall off a cliff. And that's why we're still getting children in primary schools as young as 7, 8 and 9 years old who are saying, oh, no, can't do it. Don't want to do it. Don't like PE. And yes, some of that narrative might come from parents at home and from the context they grow up in. But a lot of the time it comes because they've tried things before and they've had no success and they haven't been able to achieve. And just like we would do the same as adults, if you keep failing at something again and again and again and again and again, it doesn't matter how much we talk about this resilience piece, and it's important to be resilient and keep going. Eventually you get a bit fed up of it and a bit bored and demotivated. And kids will do just the same. So it's about how we adapt, and we do that. I don't know if I've missed anything there or you want to come back with anything there, Dan, but I've tried to summarize some of those points.
Yeah, no, perfect. No, really good. And I think, again, it's thinking about those children and what their needs and what they is. And when I taught this morning on our sort of course, was a lot about looking at children's needs. And it wasn't a case of like, what do the children want to do? Well, we want to play dodgeball for 6 weeks. It's like not giving them complete ownership of everything you do, but it's really thinking about what they need, what they're going to develop, and how that's going to then go from your, like Ryan said, your PE lesson to that wider love of moving and being active and doing things. And no, we don't want to put things off. And now even with teachers as well. Now I used to do a little bit of work with, I don't know if anyone's in the York partnership here, but a little bit of the work with the York partnership sort of last summer. And it was like one school said, right, we're doing football. And in the staff room, the teachers were moaning about it. And so if the teachers are moaning in the staff room that football's their next thing on their curriculum, that's not going to be a good start to their sort of PE delivery that's going on there. And so it's just about thinking about what you can do, just a little bit of changes, tweaks in my mate, even if it's just taking those names off and calling it something that has a bit more of a learning focus around something a bit more general, something a bit broader, strike, call your tennis unit strike and serve, or whatever you want it to be, and that's the more detail and depth into it, rather than just doing week 1, week 2, week 3 and moving through it. Really go deep into that and really have a focus of it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. For fear of repeating myself, a number of years ago now, I remember, and I probably did myself a disservice in terms of they might not want me back, but I sometimes do fall short in wearing my heart on my sleeve, and I'll just say things and get myself into trouble. But I was working with a school, and I was meant to be working there delivering, and it was with a year 1 class. And says, okay, so what are we doing? What unit are we doing? And the response, we're doing tag rugby. I said, tag rugby in year 1? So rather than just say, yeah, let's get on with it and do it, I said, we're doing tag rugby in year 1. Why? And the response was, because it's on the curriculum plan. Well, okay, so who's written that? Oh, well, we've bought it in. So your justification for your education and learning for your year 1 pupils is because of a plan someone else has written, and it says that we're doing tag rugby now. I mean, I was baffled. Anyway, there was a bit of light-hearted arguing back and forth, and we managed to change it and just did some more generic skills, but it didn't wash with me. And I think sort of one final thing is, if there are subtle shifts, it has to come over time. And I've learned this the hard way, and I've worked in some very difficult schools. And the story I tell most recently is working at a school in Middlesbrough, in the heart of Middlesbrough, very difficult area, difficult school. And I was going in brand new with my vision of what I think PE should be and is delivered like. And I was working with year 5 and year 6 classes, and the girls and the boys coming out, hey up sir, all that stuff. What are we doing? Football today? Can we do dodgeball? Are we doing this? Basically what Dan just said. And I had to say, no, that isn't what we're doing today. We're doing in physical education, and we are going to be learning X, Y, or Z. Now, you can imagine for children who've been at that school 5 or 6 years, and all they'd ever known is kind of, I'll use whether I should or not, that white van man analogy, somebody coming in with a ball and saying, right, let's have a match for all our PE lessons. It wasn't met particularly well. Needless to say, the behavior from those pupils wasn't the best. It really wasn't. And actually, there were times when it was incredibly difficult and they weren't engaging anywhere near what I wanted. And there were times I thought, maybe I'm in the wrong here. Maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree with this. But what I came to appreciate and understand is all they'd ever known was playing dodgeball and football and games. I was coming in and completely changing their perspective on PE. I had to take a step back and think, you know what, Ryan, these year 5s and 6s aren't the kids that ultimately I'm aiming to change their perspectives here, because actually they're going to be gone in another 6 months, 7 months, 8 months to high school. And I can't take it personally that the way that they're behaving, and there'll be some attitudes change, but the majority were kind of already set at that point. So I played the long game, and I had the vision in my head and thought, well, actually, this is going to be most impactful for those children in Key Stage 1. Because if they can pick up the way that I consider PE can be and could be delivered, and they get used to that as being a new culture and a new way of working in year 1 and in year 2, and in year 3. By the time they're in key stage 2, it's embedded. And any new pupils coming through, that becomes the norm for them. I was in that transitional phase, which is difficult. And it's kind of a fight or flight moment where when you're making these changes at first, they will be rocky. And I could have very easily on some of those days leaving that school when I'd had a shocker and there'd been children kicking off and some equipment had been thrown and there'd been somebody fighting over there, or they just not listened and it had not gone the way I wanted. Thought, you know what? Towel flown in. We'll just do some games next week. It would have made my life miles easier for weeks. But actually, I am playing that long game and we need to play that long game for that cultural shift and persevere and stick at it. So it isn't an easy road, but just making small changes over time and adapting it. It might be a 5-year game, but 5 years down the line, your school will be in a far better place because of it, because that will be the new culture and that will be the new norm of how physical education is in your school. There is no way this shift is going to happen over a single term or half term, particularly for those children who've been in your setting already for 3, 4, 5 years, but it will pay dividends for those coming in and those who are lower down. So I'll get off my high horse. You can see why I like to talk on a podcast, because I'll chat for hours about this. So I appreciate that, Dan. Hopefully everybody can get in touch with you and chase up more of that conversation. And
yeah,
just
I think someone asked about slides as well. If anyone wants anything from me, get in touch. I don't mind sharing some slides, or if anybody wants me to come into your school and so it's not your voice, I don't mind coming in and doing that. I'm sure you will as well, Ryan. But if anyone wants me to do it as well, I'm more than happy to.
Well, do you know, we're just about at the end of the call and ready to finish. And I suppose it won't be my voice going forwards. I mentioned this at the start of the call, but you've only got, some of you will be grateful for this, but you've only got another 10 days of me in this post anyway. So if you want to contact North Yorkshire Sport for anything and things going forwards, up until the 30th of June, that is me. That is my job title currently in post. Please do get in touch. I'm more than happy. Beyond that, if you're going to find me, you're probably going to find me as the PE umbrella man, as I always have been for a long time. That's what I'm on this Zoom call as. Feel free to get in touch and follow me on the socials there. There will be a new education manager in post. I don't know who that will be and when that will happen. So in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with North Yorkshire Sport, your best port of call will be our Director of Development, George Cull. You can catch him on the email address that you can see on the screen there, George at North Yorkshire Sport as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed past few years doing this role, but I'm looking forward to really diving headfirst back into the world of just primary school PE, lecturing at Leeds Beckett University, crossing paths with many others in that field, no doubt crossing paths with you, Dan, and the other beyond the physical team in doing so. So I'm excited about that and continuing back with the PE umbrella work as well. So it's been a pleasure. Everyone who stayed on the call, I really appreciate it. I've been recording this. I will stop recording it and make this available. It's been great to hear from Tom and from Matthew, and of course, Dan there, with so much to take on board. Those who've been on the call, I hope you've taken something from that and stay in touch with all of those folks as well. And for all of you, take care. I look forward to catching you, whether I'm still here or in my new role moving forwards. I'll speak to you all soon. Cheers, Faye. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thanks, Dave. Who else have we got on? We've got a few people lingering around. If you want to ask anything while you're lingering around, feel free. Or if you've fallen asleep, I'll know in a minute, because then I can take you out of the chat.